On June 3rd, 2023, the defendant attacked and stabbed me 17 times with the intent of killing me. On June 3rd, 2023, 538 days ago, I survived the attack, and I've continued to not only survive, but to live every single day I know I am so blessed to live. Your Honor, those months following the attack are still vivid. The mental and physical battles are still vivid and still real. In the days following the attack, I was still stuck in the ICU. I remember all the doctors, visitors, interviews, and so on. I remember the feeling of having to be rolled to have my bandages changed and tubes moved. I remember the feeling of having both of my chest tubes pulled out of me. I remember the feeling of having one of my chest tubes being pulled out of me just to be put back in. I remember the smell of the matted blood that had set in my hair from the attack. I remember being unable to sleep despite every effort. Every time I tried, I was quickly interrupted by the same reoccurring image of the defendant running at me on the day of the attack. I remember the moments I would be able to fall asleep. I would wake up screaming, being awoken from the same nightmares that I was being killed by the defendant or one of his family members. I remember one night specifically when I had woken up, finally thinking I had slept through the night, just to come to find out that I didn't actually sleep soundly, but instead woke up screaming every few minutes, begging no, screaming stop, and that I was dying. I remember my first shower that took probably 5 hours and the help of probably 5 people. I remember when physical therapy started. I remember being lifted out of the bed for the first time in a Hoyer lift and into a wheelchair beside the bed. The feeling of both my chest tubes being pulled and the feeling of almost 100 staples in my back being pressed up against the Hoyer in the chair, the pain almost unbearable. But I did it. Something so small as getting out of bed and sitting in a chair for 20 minutes felt nearly impossible, but was such a huge win. Every day after that was full of their own trials and tribulations, each day just as challenging. Physical therapy at that point consisted of just simply sitting up, something you all are doing right now, but at that time, something that was physically impossible for me, as every muscle to do so was paralyzed from the attack. I remember the pain that I felt just sitting up, the piercing pain I felt in my chest each stride, each breath. I remember every family member, every friend, and every healthcare worker who gave everything that hour just to make it somewhat bearable for me. Despite the physical and mental pain that it took, they still somehow made it just a little bit better. Eventually, I was transferred to Brooks Rehabilitation. I remember the fear of uncertainty, being moved to an unfamiliar place with unfamiliar people, unsure of how long I would be there or what the intense rehabilitation would look like. The emotional toll that came with each step, the overwhelming sense of helplessness, and the constant fear of what was next. The moments when I wondered if I would ever feel like myself again, if I would ever walk how I used to again, or be able to live through a day without being reminded of this trauma. And yet through it all, I also remember the moments of hope, the small victories, and all of the support from those around me. These memories, these moments, they stay with me forever, and they shape who I am every single day. I remember being transferred in the late afternoon, so it was quiet. I remember, despite the silence, hearing the screams of another patient down the hall, who was quickly transferred as the Brooks workers were also aware of how that could scare someone with the trauma I had. As the next day came, therapy began. 3 to 5 hours of occupational and physical therapy consumed my time. The goal started small, but the therapy was intense. Learning how to sit up on my own, change my clothes by myself, transfer myself between the bed and the wheelchair, simple everyday tasks were so difficult. Yet slowly they became easier. I remember on June 20th taking my Asian impairment exam, which is what the extent of a spinal cord injury is defined by the American Spinal Injury Association impairment scale using specific categories. I remember the exam taking a few hours and feeling so discouraged. The feeling of being unable to feel or move any of my body was so discouraging. Until finally, at the very end of the exam, after being unable to move or feel anything, I was finally told to try and move my left foot. Staring at the ceiling, still so discouraged, I tried. I remember feeling something and looking at my physical therapist. She asked me, "Did you feel that?" To which I responded, "Did it move?" And when she confirmed that I had finally moved my foot, the room was full of emotion. So overwhelmed by the feeling of simply just moving my foot, I remember the feeling of being able to tell my mom that I was now able to move my foot and her bursting into tears of joy. I remember every phone call to all of our family and friends, and each of them also overwhelmed with so much joy to see that I could finally move my foot the slightest bit. This movement gave me hope for the future, hope that I would be okay, hope that with time I would regain movement in other parts of my body, and confirm my goal that I would one day walk again. I remember after this moment, the already intense therapy becoming even more intense. The hours spent every day trying new things, strengthening each part of me, and accomplishing more and more. Each day, my left leg got stronger to the point where they were able to stand me up with assistance, and with time, on June 30th, I attempted to take my first steps with assistance. Though slow, painful, and incredibly difficult, every day after that was a new goal reached, new progress, and a new step forward. Finally, after over a month in the hospital and in rehabilitation, on July 7th, 2023, I was sent home. On that day was the first day I addressed both the community and the media. On that day, I said that there was no looking back, how incredibly lucky I am to be alive today, and how each day I would take it as its own opportunity to live and make a difference in the world, and how I am determined and confident in myself that I would reach my goals to one day walk again. And every single day following, I've continued to stand by these words. Every day, I make the choice to be positive, and I've used this trauma to help inspire and motivate others despite everything I go through personally, daily. After addressing the media, I was finally able to go home. Going home was a new battle, learning how to adjust to my new life, my new way of life in a place that was a reminder of everything that used to be was difficult. On my second day home, I was down in my room crying and finally moved my right leg. I called my mom into my room, and once again, she was immediately brought to tears. Once again, I got to experience calling all of my loved ones and sharing with them another huge victory. That following Monday, I started outpatient rehabilitation. I was in the pediatric day program at Burst Rehabilitation, to which I attended physical and occupational therapy Monday through Friday for 3 hours every morning. I attended this program until December of 2023 when I switched to their Neuro Recovery Center and continued to do physical therapy there up until today. Throughout these programs, I fought every day to accomplish my goals, one of those being to start my senior year on time with the rest of my class. And just as I fought for, I was there on the very first day, along with everyone else. Going back to school was an adjustment. I had to see all the kids I had grown up with for almost all my life, but they looked at me differently now. I was no longer just Madison, I was the girl who got stabbed. I dealt with looks, comments, questions, but I always understood. This isn't something that just happens, nor is it something that should ever have to happen. This kind of trauma isn't something that kids should have to adjust to, nor go through. But at the end of the day, in so many eyes, I was still Madison. Over time, as kids adjusted to having me back, school became easier, but managing both school and rehabilitation was difficult as I still attended therapy every single morning and always did my best to still get school when therapy was over. This was overall both physically and mentally draining, but I did it. Because the last thing I would do is let this attack, let the defendant take more away from me than he had already taken. I attended as many school events as I could, and although they were rarely ever enjoyable for me after the attack, I still went, and I tried every day to live my life as I would before. Yet it wasn't as easy as I make it sound. I dealt with anxiety in public places and in large crowds, scared that if something were to happen, I would no longer be able to protect myself. I now had to worry about things other kids never had to worry about, like would there be stairs? Can I maneuver a wheelchair through this? I can no longer go and hang out with my friends whenever I wanted or partake in activities I was able to before. I was unable to play softball my senior year of high school, the sport that had been my life since as long as I can remember. I watched as my friends changed, the friends I had known for years go through one of the most unimaginable traumas and step up for me in a way no friend should ever have to. I watched them each be affected by this attack in various ways. I watched my friends dealing with PTSD, but still being so strong for me. I watched as they all matured, as their innocence was stolen. I watched as each of them stepped up in their own way to be there for me, to help me, and to support me through whatever I needed. I watched as my family suffered. They each suffered daily as their mother and sister were almost taken from them. I watched as they all stepped up to be there for us when we couldn't be there for them. I watched as their innocence was stolen. I saw their pain, their tears, and their resilience. I watched as the once so lively, happy, and bright home became sad and dark. Get through it all.
Wow, just what a journey for this young lady. 538 days since the incident. She continues to move forward. Good for her. All right, we're going to step aside here and take a break. When we come back, the victim becomes emotional as she recalls her daily fight to walk again. And then later, we're going to hear from the defendant himself in the triple stabbing sentence hearing of Schemitz Pearson. So keep it here on your front row seat to justice.
Tonight, on Closing Arguments, Brian Camp claims he shot his girlfriend's ex-boyfriend twice in self-defense, but prosecutors say otherwise. We'll bring you the latest from today's defense case testimony.
Closing Arguments, tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
It's the biggest story that we're covering.
He is the boogeyman.
Lori Daybell.
She said, I will have you destroyed.
She's got another murder trial coming up.
A social media sensation, now a suspected killer.
Right back to that sentencing hearing where the girl who was left temporarily paralyzed after her ex-boyfriend brutally stabbed her and her mother is on the stand delivering some really compelling testimony, but now she's going to be wrapping up her victim impact statement.
I'll take away from the ways that I struggle daily. I suffer from PTSD and anxiety daily. I still deal with the sleepless nights and constant nightmares. I refuse to go outside alone at night in the dark. I feel myself fearing the worst possibilities in every situation. I've lost all trust in the world, and finding out trust in people again is far and few between. I've lost any childlike innocence and I've been forced to grow up in a way most kids never have to. I've chosen to live the way I live and be so positive to hide the dark reality that I go through. I often laugh and smile to not let those around me realize that I am suffering so that they don't have to be sad as well. I deal with mental battles every day about my physical state and what my future may look like. My thoughts are often clouded by the what-ifs and the why-me questions because why me? Why did something so horrific and life-changing have to happen to me? Why did someone so evil need to try and take everything away from me? Why did someone so evil try and end the life of someone who showed him so much kindness and patience? Why me? Your Honor, the defendant's decision on June 3rd, 2023 will haunt me for the rest of my life. My future physical and mental state is still so uncertain, but always affected. The way I live, the way I love, forever changed. Yet I will always be a more kind, understanding, patient, loving, and overall better person than the defendant ever was. Your Honor, if it weren't for the brave and heroic acts of both my mother and Kennedy Armstrong on June 3rd, 2023, I would not be alive. My mother put her life on the line to save mine. The defendant so selfishly not only tried to take my life, but also tried to take my mother's. The most badass, selfless, and incredible woman and mom anyone would be so lucky to have in their lives. My mother has always and will always be my best friend. I am proud to be her. I am proud to be her daughter and thankful for her for her every single day. I've watched her struggle in more ways than I can explain in the last 538 days, yet she still always puts her kids before herself. Bleeding out and all, she was still there for me before even thinking of herself. She slept right by my side for over a month and was there through every single step of it all. Without her, I would not be here today, but without Kennedy Armstrong, neither of us would be here. A complete stranger so selflessly ran towards the screens, ran towards the danger, and saved both of our lives. Kennedy, you are truly one of the most brave and amazing human beings I have ever met. Despite your own trauma, your own physical injuries, and every way this attack negatively impacted your own life, you always remained so selfless. You always reminded us that you were here for whatever we needed and never wanted any praise or recognition, but you are the hero. You are the reason we are alive, and you are who reminds me every single day that good people do exist in the world. Words can never explain just how beyond thankful I am for you and your family. I thank both my mom and Kennedy for being my heroes that day. Two people who are so incredibly undeserving of the evil actions that the defendant showed on June 3rd, 2023. Your Honor, I could talk for hours on end about the way that the defendant has negatively impacted each of our lives. But I think after each of these impact statements, it is apparent, it is real, it is constant, and it is daily. Every day is a reminder of the trauma we all endured on June 3rd, 2023. Every day I'm affected by the physical and mental impacts of the defendant's actions. And every day is a reminder of just how cruel, monstrous, and evil the defendant truly is. There is no excuse for his actions. There will never be an excuse. On that day, the defendant chose to try and take my life. He chose to try and take my mother's life, and he chose to severely harm a good and innocent stranger. Your Honor, I can confidently say I am one of the least deserving human beings to have to go through what I have been forced to go through. Your Honor, this is something I will have to deal with for the rest of my life, something I should never have to deal with, and something the defendant should never have the opportunity to do again. Your Honor, on June 3rd, 2023, I was given my own life sentence by the defendant, and I plead with you that the defendant receives the same justified sentence and deserved punishment. Thank you.